The night on the alien research station was silent yet alive, with strange sounds that never ended, as vents hissed with cold air and machines hummed in the dark corners of long halls and deep rooms, where no human ever dared to walk except for one forgotten worker, a man named Elias, who carried no rank, no title, and no respect. He was the janitor, a cleaner of waste, a wiper of floors, the one all others ignored. He moved from one corridor to another, pushing his small cart of brushes and buckets, while alien guards passed him, without a glance in their eyes to them. He was less than nothing. He was a shadow, a moving tool made of flesh. Elias knew this life. He had lived it for many years, his back bent from hard work, his hands cracked from strange alien soaps, his lungs filled with dust from vents never cleaned by anyone. But him, he never asked for thanks, he never asked for notice. He only wanted a quiet life, a life without trouble, a life where each day ended as the last. But fate never rests quietly. Fate waits hidden in corners unseen, and then rises without warning. And on this night fate rose before Elias in the form of a door that had been left open by mistake, a door that no human was meant to enter, a door that led down into the ancient vault where secrets older than empires lay in silent darkness. Elias pushed his cart past the open frame and paused, his eyes caught by a glow deep within. He looked left, he looked right. No guard watched him, no alien called to stop him. His heart told him to keep walking, to forget what he saw, yet his feet moved slowly, as if drawn by an unseen hand. He stepped into the forbidden place and felt the air change around him, colder, heavier, full of a hum that echoed in his bones. Down stone steps and metal stairs he walked. A small lamp in hand, shadows danced along walls carved with symbols he could not read, pictures of stars and battles forgotten in time. The sound grew louder, a low hum that filled the air like a living heartbeat, and at the end of the path he saw it resting on a high stone table, the artifact, the relic that legends whispered of, the one no alien dared to touch, for it answered to none. The artifact was shaped like a sphere and a crown and a blade all at once, its surface smooth yet shifting, as if a live light flowed across it like rivers of fire. It pulsed with color. In silence, watching, waiting, sleeping for countless ages, Elias felt his knees weaken. He should have turned, he should have fled, yet his hand lifted slowly, as if the relic itself called his blood. He reached out, fingers trembling with fear. The moment his skin touched the cold surface, the station shook. A wave of light burst from the relic and filled the chamber. Alarms screamed, red lights spun across the ceiling. The hum became a roar that rang through walls, floors, and air above. The alien guards froze their weapons, raised their eyes wide, for the relic had awakened, and it awakened not for them, but for a human janitor. Elias fell back, his breath gone, his eyes filled with a glow of visions. He saw fire, he saw stars, he saw warriors crowned in flame. His heart pounded. He had no words, no answers, but he knew he had touched something forbidden, something alive, and it had chosen him. The guards rushed down into the chamber, their voices sharp, their weapons ready, yet none dared step too close. They saw the relic shining bright in the presence of Elias. They saw a truth that should not exist. The bloodline, thought lost forever, now returned. They dragged Elias from the vault, his arms held tight, his mind still filled with visions. He could not explain. The artifact remained glowing, still alive for the first time in ages, and every alien eye turned toward him, no longer a shadow, no longer ignored, no longer unseen. Elias, the forgotten janitor, had unlocked the artifact, and with that single touch the galaxy began to change. The alien guards dragged Elias through long winding corridors of cold metal walls, while alarms still echoed behind them, and whispers spread like fire across the station about the human janitor who had touched the forbidden relic and lived. The relic that had never answered to any alien hand now burned with light because of a simple man who carried no title, no power, and no weapon. Elias struggled to breathe as he was shoved forward, yet his mind burned hotter than the pain in his arms. He saw visions and flashes whenever he closed his eyes, battles in ancient sky, soldiers crowned in flame, cities of stone swallowed by endless war, voices speaking in a tongue he could not know, but somehow could feel inside his blood. He did not understand what it meant, but he could not deny that the relic had awakened for him alone. At the highest tower of the station, the guards brought Elias into the great chamber of the Galactic Council, a hall so vast that the ceiling seemed lost in shadow. Above, banners of alien houses hung down, lit by blue fire torches that gave no smoke. The chamber was filled with the most powerful beings in the region, tall-scaled nobles with burning yellow eyes, winged elders draped in silver robes, towering insect lords whose many arms clutched scepters of bone. All of them turned as one to face Elias. The human janitor dragged before them like a thief. The council high speaker raised a long hand, and silence filled the chamber. His voice echoed with anger and disbelief as he declared that the relic of flame had been awakened for the first time in 1,000 years, not by a warrior, not by a noble, not by any living heir, but by a creature the council considered little more than dirt, a human who carried water buckets and cleaned waste from their sacred halls. The chamber roared with outrage. Voices rose like thunder. Some shouted for the human to be executed at once to erase the shame of what had happened. Others demanded the relic be locked away again, while the human was cut apart and studied for secrets. Still others sat in silence, their sharp eyes fixed on Elias, as if searching for proof of what they already feared. Elias stood trembling. He wished he could disappear, yet he could not forget the feeling when the relic answered his touch, the fire that rushed into his blood, the vision of forgotten kings and queens whose faces looked strangely like his own, though crowned in flame and wrapped in light. The high speaker struck the ground with his staff, calling for order. He declared that the bloodline of flame had been destroyed long ago in the Great Purge, when all heirs were hunted down and burned until nothing remained. If the relic had answered to Elias, then one truth remained: either the relic was broken or the human carried the bloodline within him. Shock moved through the chamber like a storm. If the human carried the bloodline, then the purge had failed. If the purge had failed, then the ancient oath sworn by the council was broken. And if the oath was broken, then the galaxy itself could burn with rebellion. The guards pressed Elias down on his knees before the council, yet none dared strike him. The relic's glow still clung faintly to his skin, like sparks of fire that refused to fade even without the sphere in sight. The power whispered from him, and the council feared what that meant. Elias tried to speak, his voice shaking. He told them he was no king, no warrior, only a worker who wanted nothing but peace. He said he did not know why the relic chose him, and begged to be released. Yet his words only deepened the anger of many lords, for to them his humility was a lie, or worse, a threat. One of the winged elders rose, her feathers glowing faintly with silver light. She spoke with a calm voice that cut through the noise. She said the relic could not be tricked or deceived. It would only awaken for true blood and true spirit. If this human carried the spark of flame, then he carried the right to rule, and no hand in the galaxy could change that truth. The council broke into chaos. Once more some cried that humanity must be destroyed at once. Before others rose and called Elias a rightful heir. Some shouted for war, while others whispered of alliances and shadows. Elias himself stood lost in the center of it all, a single man who had never been seen, now standing before rulers who argued over his blood. In that moment Elias felt again the strange fire rise within him. He saw not the chamber, but flashes of other times, men and women standing before crowds, lifting swords that blazed with light, voices swearing oaths to defend the weak, faces shining with the same spark that now burned inside him. He felt fear, but also a strange pull, as if the relic had not simply chosen him, but reminded him of what he already was. The high speaker struck his staff once more, and the sound silenced every voice. He declared that the matter would not be decided in shouting. The human would be tested. The relic would speak again, not with a flash, not with an accident, but with proof. If Elias survived the trial, he would live. If he failed, his bloodline would die with him, and the galaxy would rest at peace. The guards dragged Elias back from the chamber down into cells of cold stone, where chains clung to his arms and shadows covered his face. He sat alone, listening to distant whispers above as lords argued over his fate, some planning his death, some plotting his rise. He was no longer invisible. He was no longer forgotten. In the darkness Elias closed his eyes, and the fire returned. He heard whispers of the relic calling to him, not with words, but with feelings of weight and power. It told him he carried the spark that had never died. It told him his blood held memory older than empires, and it told him the trial would not only judge him, but awaken all that was hidden. Elias sat in silence, his heart pounding with fear, his mind heavy with visions. He had never asked for tomorrow. He would face a test that no one expected him to survive. Tomorrow the galaxy would see if the janitor was truly the heir of flame. Tomorrow he would learn if the relic had lied or if destiny had been waiting for him all along. The night inside the cell was long and heavy for Elias. The air was cold, the chains cut into his wrists, and the whispers of alien guards outside the door carried fear and curiosity more than hatred. They spoke of him as if he was no longer a man, but a mystery. Some called him a liar, others called him the chosen one, yet all agreed that the relic had not awakened in thousands of years until his hand touched its surface, and now nothing could erase that truth. Elias lay on the hard stone floor, his eyes half closed, as the visions returned stronger than before. Flames moved across endless skies, fleets burned above shattered planets, voices rose in chants of war and loyalty, and always at the center of those visions stood figures, crowned in light, their faces sharp, their eyes fierce, their presence both human and more than human. He did not understand the words spoken in the visions, yet his heart knew them. They were oaths of kings and queens sworn to protect, sworn to fight, sworn to never bow. When morning came, the guards opened the cell and pulled Elias into the light. The halls were filled with silence as soldiers lined the walls, watching him with unreadable eyes. The path led not back to the council chamber, but deeper into the heart of the station, where doors of black stone opened with a sound like thunder, revealing the chamber of relics, a place where history itself seemed to breathe. Inside the chamber stood rows of pedestals, each holding fragments of ancient power, broken weapons, shattered crowns, burned scrolls that no one had ever read. Yet in the center of the chamber floated the artifact, alive with fire. It pulsed like a heart, casting red and gold across the walls, and the moment Elias entered it glowed brighter, as if greeting him. The council members stood in a half circle, their robes heavy, their faces grim. The high speaker raised his staff and declared that the relic would decide the truth. If Elias was truly of the bloodline, it would reveal its secret. If not, then it would consume him, and no one would mourn the loss of a janitor. Elias felt the eyes of the galaxy upon him. Though only a few stood in that room, he knew that his fate would echo across worlds. He stepped forward, the chains removed from his arms, his hands shaking, yet drawn to the light. He whispered to himself that he was nothing more than a worker, nothing more than a man who had no right to stand in this place. Yet the fire inside his blood pushed him onward. He reached out and touched the relic once more, and the chamber filled with blinding light. The walls vanished, the floor dissolved, the council and guards were gone. Elias found himself standing in a vast field beneath a sky burning with two suns. Towers of stone rose in the distance, banners of flame fluttered in hot winds, and before him stood a figure tall and fierce, with eyes that burned like stars. The figure spoke, though no words passed through air. It spoke in the blood, in the marrow of Elias. The voice said, "You are of us, you are of the flame, you are of the blood that never died. The purge could not erase us, the stars could not forget us. The fire waited for you to awaken, and now you must choose." Elias tried to answer. He said he was no warrior. He said he was no leader. He said he was a janitor who cleaned halls while others ruled. Yet the figure only lifted a hand, and fire moved through his veins, filling him with strength and memory. He saw battlefields where his ancestors stood. He saw fleets bending the knee to his line. He saw the oath of the bloodline sworn to defend humanity and to guide the galaxy through fire. The vision shifted, and Elias saw shadows, armies of alien lords who had sworn to end the bloodline. He saw the purge carried out with cruelty and fire. He saw children of flame hunted across the stars until the blood was hidden deep in forgotten corners, and in that hidden place humanity carried the spark unknowingly, until Elias himself touched the relic and woke it from sleep. The figure said, "The bloodline is not power alone, it is burden, it is choice. You must decide if you will rise or fall. The galaxy will judge you, but first you must judge yourself." The vision ended with a rush of fire, and Elias fell to his knees in the chamber. Once more the relic floated before him, still burning with light, and the council stood frozen, their eyes wide, for they too had seen fragments of the vision. The air shimmered with the echo of the voice. Though they could not understand the words, they knew the relic had spoken. The high speaker's face was pale with fear. He whispered that the relic had confirmed the truth. The bloodline of flame lived within the human janitor. The purge had failed, the oath was broken, and destiny had returned. The chamber filled with shouts. Some called for Elias to be crowned, others screamed that he must be killed at once before rebellion spread. Some fell silent, with awe, unwilling to speak against the relic that had proven itself beyond doubt. Elias rose, his body weak, yet his spirit burning. He looked at the council and said he never wanted this, he never asked for this. He was not chosen by desire, but by blood. Yet he could not deny what he had seen. He could not deny what the relic had shown him. The fire within him was alive, and the galaxy would not forget it again. The High Speaker declared that Elias would be placed under guard and studied until a decision could be made. Yet even as he spoke, whispers spread beyond the chamber. Guards told others, workers spread rumors, and soon the entire station murmured with the story of the human who carried the bloodline of flame. Some looked at him with fear, some with hatred, some with desperate hope that maybe humanity was not weak, maybe humanity was not forgotten, maybe the janitor was more than they had believed. That night Elias sat in a guarded chamber, no longer chained, but watched by eyes that did not blink. The relic floated near him, its light softer, yet constant, and in its glow he heard whispers, not of fire, not of war, but of memory, voices of his ancestors, telling him that the secret was no longer hidden. The galaxy now knew the truth. Elias closed his eyes and whispered that he wished for silence, that he wished for peace, yet in his heart he knew peace was gone forever, for once a secret is revealed it cannot be buried again, and the secret within him was the fire of a lost bloodline, now awakened, now alive, and soon the galaxy would demand its price. Elias sat in the guarded chamber, his body tired, his mind burning with memories that were not his own. The relic floated near him, like a silent watcher, its glow softer than before, but never fading. It pulsed in rhythm with his heart, as if tied to his very blood, and though the alien guards stood at every corner, with weapons ready, none dared touch him, none dared step close, for fear that the relic would answer again with fire. Elias felt the weight of the galaxy pressing down on his shoulders. He was only a janitor. He had no training, no power, no desire for crowns or wars. He wanted only to clean the halls and pass his life unnoticed. Yet the relic had torn that away. It had shown him visions of rulers with burning eyes. It had filled his veins with memories of empires long gone, and it had whispered that he must choose. He could not run forever. He could not hide. The truth, the secret within his blood was awake, and the galaxy would not forget. The council gathered again. The High Speaker called for judgment, and the lords filled the chamber with voices sharp as blades. Some demanded Elias be executed before the news spread further. Some argued that the relic had chosen, and they had no right to deny it, and a few sat silent, watching with eyes like hunters, waiting for prey to stumble. The air was thick with anger, fear, and hidden plans. Elias was brought before them once more, the relic hovering at his side, like a flame that refused to die. He felt every gaze pierce into his skin, yet he stood straighter than before. Though his knees shook inside, his heart whispered that he was no longer invisible, no longer a shadow, for the fire inside him gave him strength that even chains could not break. The High Speaker struck a staff and declared that the human would face a choice. He would either accept the trial of flame and prove his blood, or he would refuse and be cast aside into death. There could be no middle path, for the relic had revealed its truth, and the galaxy demanded an answer. Elias listened, and fear gnawed at him. He wanted to cry that he was not ready, that he was not worthy. Yet, when he opened his mouth, the words that came were not his own. He heard himself say that he would face the trial, his voice steady, though his soul trembled. The chamber shook with gasps and murmurs. The relic pulsed brighter, as if approving the decision. The choice was made, and destiny moved forward. That night Elias was taken to a small chamber, where no voices of lords could reach him. Only the relic hovered close, whispering through silent light. It showed him visions of those who had walked the trial before kings, who stood against armies, queens, who raised banners of flame, warriors who bled for honor, and all of them stared at Elias, as if asking, will you carry us? Will you rise where we fell, or will you break and let the bloodline die? Elias whispered that he was only a man with no sword and no crown, only a worker who cleaned waste. Yet the visions did not fade. Instead, they drew closer, their faces stern, but not cruel. They said through their eyes that the blood was never about crowns, never about thrones, but about endurance. And will the strength to rise when crushed, the courage to stand when all others kneel, the choice to burn for others rather than hide for oneself. When morning came, he was led into the trial chamber, a place older than the station itself, carved into the heart of a black stone mountain, walls covered in glowing runes that shifted like living fire, the air thick with heat and shadows. Waiting, the council watched from high seats above, and guards lined the walls, their eyes cold, yet curious. The High Speaker lifted his staff and declared that the human would now face the trial of flame and prove whether the relic spoke truth or lies. Elias stepped forward, the relic hovering by his side. The chamber door closed behind him, and silence fell heavy in the heat. Then the ground trembled, and the walls opened, revealing paths of fire, rivers of molten stone, bridges of black glass that shifted under his feet, creatures of shadow rising from smoke, their eyes red with hate, their voices whispering that he was weak, that he was nothing, that he should fall. Elias trembled, yet he kept moving one step at a time across the shifting bridges. The heat burned his skin, the air tore at his lungs, shadows clawed at him, whispering lies of worthlessness. Yet the relic pulsed brighter each time. He resisted each time. He chose to move forward each time. He refused to fall. He remembered his life as a janitor, the nights spent unseen, the years spent bent and weary, and he realized that survival was nothing new. He had lived his whole life enduring pain, without glory. He had risen every day though no one cared. He had worked though no one saw, and now that same endurance carried him forward across fire and shadow. At the center of the chamber, he reached a great flame rising from the stone. Like a living pillar, the relic moved into the fire, and Elias felt it call to him. He stepped into the blaze, his heart certain that it would burn him to ash, yet instead the fire wrapped around him. Like armor, the visions returned stronger than ever, the kings and queens of old standing beside him, whispering that he was one of them, not by choice, not by will, but by blood and by fire. The chamber shook as the flames roared, and when Elias stepped out, his body glowed with sparks, the relic hovering in his hand. Like a living blade, the shadows vanished, the rivers cooled, the runes burned with light. The trial was complete, and Elias had endured. The council watched in silence, their faces pale, their voices caught in their throats. They had hoped for his death, yet they had seen him rise through fire. They had seen the relic bind itself to him. They had seen the proof that the bloodline of flame was alive, and no lie could erase it. Elias stood in the chamber, breathing heavy, his hands trembling, his body weary. But alive he had passed, not by strength, not by weapons, but by will alone. And in that moment he knew the truth of his ancestors. The bloodline was not about ruling, it was about enduring, it was about carrying fire even in darkness, and that fire now lived in him. The High Speaker trembled with anger, yet could not deny the result. He declared that the human had survived the trial, the relic had chosen him, the bloodline had returned, and though the council might resist, the galaxy would know the truth. Whispers would spread faster than light, worlds would hear of the janitor who carried fire, and nothing could silence it. That night Elias sat again in silence, the relic warm in his hand, his heart filled with fear, but also with something new, not pride, not ambition, but resolve. He had faced the fire and endured, and though he still wished for peace, he knew peace would never come. Now the galaxy would demand more, the galaxy would demand a choice, and he would have to answer, not as a janitor, not as a worker, but as the heir of flame. The council chamber was heavy with silence after the trial of flame. The lords who had hoped for the death of Elias now sat with pale faces, while others whispered behind their robes. The relic had chosen, and the relic had protected the human janitor through fire and shadow, and no one could deny what they had seen with their own eyes. The bloodline was alive, and its spark burned again. Yet even as truth stood before them, fear twisted their hearts, for if the bloodline lived, then rebellion would stir across the stars. Worlds once ruled by flame would rise. Once more the ancient oaths sworn to follow would awaken, and the power of the council would break. And so in their fear they plotted a path that would silence Elias without disobeying the relic directly. They would give him a test not of spirit, but of survival, a task designed to kill him, without their hands stained by his blood. The High Speaker stood tall and declared that the relic's trial was sacred, but tradition demanded more. Before the human could be recognized as heir, he must face the first test, a mission beyond the station, where no relic could shield him, where only his will and his blood could decide if he lived or died. The council agreed in loud voices, though many hid smiles in the corners of their mouths, for they believed this test would end what the trial had begun. Elias listened with his head bowed, his hands shaking, though he tried to hide it. The fire within his veins still burned from the relic's touch, yet he felt the weight of exhaustion heavier than stone. He wanted rest, he wanted silence, yet the council demanded another step forward, and he could not refuse, for the relic at his side pulsed with light, as if urging him onward. That night Elias was given no rest. Instead, he was taken to the docks, where alien soldiers prepared a small craft for launch. The council told him his task. He would be sent to the ruins of an old world once burned in the purge, a place where no life remained, yet the ruins were said to hold one more relic, a shard of the flame lost in war. If he could recover it and return, then the galaxy would accept him as heir. If he failed, then his bloodline would end and the council would remain strong. The ship was small, its walls cold and empty. Elias stepped inside with the relic, hovering near his shoulder, glowing faintly, as if guiding him. The soldiers sealed the hatch, the engines roared, and soon he was cast into the void of space, alone, his heart pounding in fear and dread, his hands gripping the controls, though he had never flown a craft before. Through the dark he drifted until the broken planet appeared before him, a world cracked by war, its skies black, its surface scarred by fire and ash. He landed in silence, the ship shaking as it touched down on dead soil. When the door opened, the air was heavy with dust and smoke. The ruins stretched far across the horizon, towers, broken bridges, collapsed cities, swallowed by silence. Elias stepped out, his body shaking, but his feet steady. He carried no weapon, only the relic that floated close, its glow soft against the darkness. He walked through the ruins, hearing whispers in the wind, voices of those who had died long ago, their cries echoing through the stone, each step heavier than the last, as if the world itself tried to crush him back into the soil. The deeper he walked, the stronger the whispers became. Shadows moved at the edge of his sight, figures of ash rising from broken walls, their faces twisted with rage, their eyes burning red. Elias felt terror grip his chest, yet the relic pulsed, and the shadows paused, their voices whispering that he must prove himself, that he must carry the fire or fall into dust like those before him. At the center of the ruins he found a chamber half buried in stone. Inside, upon a pedestal of black glass, lay the shard of flame, glowing faintly with dying light. The moment he stepped close, the shadows rose, fully forming an army of ash with blades of smoke, their voices screaming that he was not worthy, that he would not pass, that he would die as so many before him had died. Elias trembled. He had no sword, no shield, only his will. Yet he remembered the trial. He remembered the fire that had wrapped around him, not as a weapon, but as armor. He lifted his hand, and the relic at his side flared with light. The shadows struck, but the fire spread around him, burning bright. Their blades turned to smoke, their bodies to dust, and one by one they fell into silence. Breathing hard, Elias stepped to the pedestal and reached for the shard. The moment his skin touched it, the relic fused with the shard, and light burst from them. Both the ruins shook, the skies tore open, and for a moment Elias saw the past, the city alive, with flamed towers, tall banners raised, voices singing in unity before fire, and war consumed it all. He saw kings fall, queens burn, and the bloodline hunted to its last breath, until silence ruled the world. Once more, the vision ended, and Elias stood holding the shard, now alive once more with fire, his heart heavy with grief, yet burning with strength. The relic whispered within him that this was the burden of the bloodline, to carry not only power, but memory, to feel the weight of the fallen, and rise despite it. He carried the shard back to the ship, his steps slow, yet steady. The shadows no longer rose against him, the voices silent, as if bowed in respect. He left the ruined world behind, and as his craft lifted into the dark sky, he knew the council would not welcome his return, for he had survived what they thought impossible. He had passed the first test. When the ship returned to the station, the council gathered with faces grim. Elias stepped from the craft, the shard glowing in his hands, the relic pulsing with light. The soldiers bowed their heads, though no order had been given. Whispers spread faster than fire. The janitor had faced the ruins and lived. The relic had answered again, and the first test had been passed. The high speaker tried to hide his anger with solemn words, declaring that Elias had succeeded, but more trials would come, for the bloodline was not proven by one act. Yet even as he spoke, the relic flared brighter than before, casting light across the chamber, and many in the council turned their eyes away, unable to meet its fire, for they knew the truth. The first test had been meant to kill him, yet he had returned stronger. That night Elias sat alone, once more the shard resting near him, the relic whispering softly in his mind. He thought of the ruins, he thought of the voices, he thought of the fire that carried him forward. He whispered to himself that he was afraid, yet he also whispered that he would not fall, for the choice was no longer only his. The galaxy was watching, the galaxy was waiting, and the fire within him would not be hidden again. The return from the first test did not bring peace for Elias. Instead, it brought storms of fear and whispers that spread like fire across the station and into the stars. The relic glowed brighter, now joined with the shard of flame, its light reaching through walls and into the hearts of those who saw it. No longer was Elias only a man who had awakened an artifact. He was now the bearer of two living relics, and that truth could not be hidden. The council sat in chambers night after night, Their voices sharp, their faces grim. Some argued that Elias must be destroyed before he gained more strength. Others warned that open defiance against the relic would bring disaster, for the relic had chosen, and if they struck him down, the fire itself might rise against them. Yet every voice carried fear, for fleets across the galaxy had already heard the whispers. The Bloodline had returned, and worlds that once bowed to flame now stirred and restless. Silence. Elias felt none of this. In full, he sat alone in his quarters, watched by guards who no longer looked at him with contempt, but with unease. His dreams were filled with visions of the past. His body burned with the whispers of the relic, and his heart wrestled with the truth that he could not escape. He was no longer invisible, no longer a forgotten janitor, for the galaxy now weighed him like a scale, and he could not step away. The relic pulsed at night, whispering through light, not in words, but in feelings. It showed him fires spreading across maps, stars bending toward war, and voices chanting his name. Though he never wanted it, he woke each morning with sweat upon his skin and dread in his chest, for he knew something larger than himself was moving. Soon the first fleets arrived. Ships of alien houses that once served the flame now stood on the edge of the system. Some came with banners raised in secret allegiance, others came with weapons ready to strike, and still more lingered, uncertain, watching to see if the council would crown him or kill him. The station became a center of storms, and Elias stood at the heart without choice. The council ordered Elias into seclusion, yet still messages reached him, small scraps smuggled by workers who once ignored him, but now looked upon him with desperate hope. They wrote the humanity across colonies, whispered his name. They wrote that slaves in chains prayed for his rise. They wrote that even among alien worlds many longed for the fire of the Bloodline to return. Elias read these words with trembling hands, for he had never sought to lead. Yet the relic pressed within him, reminding him that choice was no longer his. The High Speaker summoned him once more. The council chamber heavy with division. The speaker declared that war would come unless Elias bent the knee to the council, swore loyalty, and surrendered the relic. Then perhaps the fleets would be calmed, and the galaxy would return to order. Elias listened in silence, his heart torn, for he wanted peace. He wanted quiet. Yet he knew the relic would never surrender. It pulsed in anger at the very thought, filling the chamber with sparks of fire that silenced every lord. Elias raised his voice, shaking yet clear. He said he could not surrender the relic, for it was not his to give. It was bound to his blood, and to deny it would be to deny truth itself. He said he would not raise a throne nor seek a crown, but he would not bow to lies either. The chamber erupted with fury, some shouting for his death, others crying that he spoke with the voice of kings. The High Speaker struck his staff, demanding silence, yet even he could not hide the fear in his eyes. That night assassins came, shadows cloaked in poison and steel. They slipped into his chamber as the guards stood blind, but the relic flared in warning. Fire spread across the floor, and Elias woke with fear as the assassins struck, blades meeting sparks. Shadows burned to ash, their screams echoing as the relic shielded him. Elias sat shaking among the flames, knowing that survival no longer meant he was safe. Survival meant that enemies would never stop coming. Across the stars more fleets moved. Battles broke upon distant colonies. Worlds split between loyalty and rebellion. The Bloodline's return became a storm, and Elias could feel the fire rising within him stronger each day. The relic fused deeper with his blood until sparks danced across his skin. Even when he slept, he felt memories, not his own, guiding him. The voices of ancestors whispering that awakening was not only power, it was burden to stand where others had fallen and to rise when the galaxy demanded. The council fractured under the weight. Some lords fled the station, joining fleets that gathered in secret. Others remained, plotting Elias's death in silence, and a few began to bow in truth, recognizing that they could not fight the fire that burned before them. The High Speaker himself grew desperate, calling for more trials, more tests, hoping to delay the storm. Yet the relic pulsed brighter each day, as if counting down to something greater. Elias walked the station in guarded silence, yet everywhere he went eyes followed him. Workers who once ignored him now knelt as he passed. Soldiers lowered weapons, though no order demanded it. Even some lords whispered words of respect, though they quickly hid them. Elias felt fear grow heavier, for he had not chosen this path, yet the galaxy chose it for him. He wanted to turn away, yet the relic's whispers reminded him that turning away would burn not only him, but all who believed in the flame. Visions filled him stronger than ever. He saw vast battles between stars. He saw fleets bending the knee. He saw fire burning through darkness. and at the center he saw himself, not as a king upon a throne, but as a torch carried through storms, his body weary, yet unbroken, his bloodline, not ruling by crowns, but surviving by will and endurance. He realized then that the awakening was not only of relics or fleets, it was of himself. He could no longer hide behind fear or silence. He was awake, and the galaxy would not allow him to return to shadows. When dawn came again, he stood before the window of his chamber, watching the stars burn. With distant fleets the relic pulsed, like a heart at his side, and he whispered to himself words he never thought he would speak. He said, "I am afraid, but I will not fall. I am weary, but I will not bow. The fire is awake, and I will endure." Beyond the station the fleets moved closer and closer. Soon the clash would come. Soon the galaxy would see if the awakening was a dawn or a doom. And Elias, the forgotten janitor, stood ready, though his hands trembled, though his heart feared for the fire within him no longer slept, and nothing in the stars could silence it again. The fleets gathered beyond the station, their shadows vast upon the stars, countless ships of alien houses, circling like predators, each waiting for the first strike. Banners of rebellion raised, in secret banners of fear raised, in defiance. The galaxy itself held its breath, for all knew the truth. The bloodline had awakened, the relic had chosen, and the fire that once ruled empires now burned within a human janitor named Elias. Inside the station the council broke apart. Some lords fled into the fleets, others locked themselves behind iron doors, while the high speaker stood trembling yet proud upon the great chamber floor, his staff striking stone, as he declared that the bloodline would not rise again, that Elias would die before the galaxy bent to his will. His voice rang with fury, but his eyes held terror, for he knew the fleets outside no longer listened to him. They listened only for the fire. Elias stood within his guarded chamber, the relic pulsing with light, the shard glowing at his side. Together they burned brighter than ever before, filling the room with warmth and fear alike. The guards, who once despised him, now bowed their heads, unable to meet his eyes. Workers came to leave small offerings of food and water, not from duty, but from faith. They whispered prayers to him, as though he were already crowned, though he never asked for such devotion. The visions returned stronger than ever, fire across the skies, fleets bowing in surrender, shadows screaming in defeat. His ancestors stood around him in lines, endless their faces, stern yet proud. They whispered that the bloodline was not meant for comfort or silence. It was meant to endure and to lead. When the galaxy turned to ash, Elias felt the weight of their gaze, and his heart trembled. Yet he knew he could no longer deny the truth. He was awake, and the galaxy demanded he rise. The high speaker made his final move. He summoned Elias to the chamber under guard, declaring before all that the human would be executed, that the relic would be sealed away once more. But even as he spoke, the chamber doors shook with thunder. The fleets outside had begun to fire. Light filled the skies. As war erupted, the council screamed. As the station trembled, weapons blazing in the void, fire spreading across metal and stone. The relic flared with power, pulling Elias forward into the chamber. Flames rose around him, without heat, yet with force that shook every wall. The guards fell back in all their weapons. Forgotten, the lords froze in terror. The high speaker raised his staff, yet his hand shook too hard to strike. Elias lifted his voice, not with pride, but with fire. He declared that he had not sought this path. He had not sought crowns nor thrones, but the relic had chosen, and no voice in the galaxy could silence truth. The chamber cracked with light. The relic fused with the shard, bursting into a shape of fire. Both weapon and crown had wrapped around Elias like armor. His eyes burned with sparks, his hands glowed with the heat of ancient blood. The high speaker tried to flee, but the fire rose, blocking his path. Shadows of ancestors stood behind Elias, their voices whispering in thunder. The bloodline returns. The fleets outside clashed in chaos. Some fought to destroy him, others fought to protect him. But when Elias stepped onto the station deck, and the relic shone brighter than suns, the battle slowed. The fire spread across the void, not as flame, but as light pulsing through every ship, through every mind. Voices fell silent, eyes turned to him, and for a breathless moment the galaxy knew the bloodline had returned, not as a whisper, not as a rumor, but as fire alive. Elias raised his hand, the relic blazing, and he spoke words that were not his own, but carried the weight of ages. He said, "I will not rule by chains, I will not rise by crowns, I will endure as my ancestors endured. I will fight for those who are forgotten, as I was forgotten. The fire is not for thrones, it is for survival and for hope. If you seek war, I will endure. If you seek peace, I will endure, but I will not bow." The fleets trembled, some lowered their weapons in silence, some fell to their knees in surrender, others fled into the stars, unwilling to face the fire. The High Speaker screamed curses from the chamber, but his voice was drowned by the roar of countless ships. Bowing to the light, Elias felt the relic pulse stronger than ever, whispering that the bloodline was no longer a secret. It was alive, it was awake, and it would never fall again. The station shook as rebels stormed through halls. Workers rose against guards, slaves broke their chains. Hope spread like fire, while the council crumbled under the weight of truth. Elias walked through the chaos, the relic guiding him each step, his presence alone breaking the will of those who sought to kill him. He was no longer the janitor, ignored and unseen. He was the heir of flame, the torch of survival, the bloodline that had returned. At the heart of the station he stood upon the high balcony, the fleets burning above, the stars blazing around him. The relic shone like a sun, his eyes glowed with fire, his voice carried through every hall and every ship. He spoke to all who could hear. He said, I am Elias. I was once nothing, I was once unseen, but the fire chose me, as it once chose those before me. I will not run from it, I will not deny it, I will endure, and so will humanity. The roar that answered shook the void, countless voices rising in unity across ships, across stations, across worlds. The galaxy that had once forgotten now remembered. The bloodline had returned, and its torch burned brighter than ever. The High Speaker fell into silence, his power broken, his voice meaningless. The fleets no longer listened to him, the galaxy no longer feared him, for the fire had chosen another. Elias stood in silence, his heart heavy, his hands trembling. He had not asked for this, yet he could not deny it. He felt the relic warm against his skin, and the voices of ancestors fading into whispers of pride. He whispered to himself that he would endure, that he would carry the burden, not as a king upon a throne, but as a man who once cleaned the halls unseen, the forgotten janitor who awakened the bloodline and returned it to the stars. The battle ended not in fire, but in silence. Fleets, drifting bows, lowered enemies, fled allies, gathered. The relic pulsed with peace. For a brief moment Elias knew the truth. The galaxy had changed forever. The bloodline was no longer a memory. It was no longer extinct. It lived, it breathed, it endured, and it had returned through him. And so the janitor, once forgotten, now stood as the torch of a new age. The bloodline returned, and the galaxy would never be the same again.